Imagine selling more of your core product than at any point in your entire corporate history,
Hmm.
literally breaking all-time volume records.
Right.
And your reward for that is a 12 billion rupee drop in profit.
Yeah, it's rough.
Today, we are doing a deep dive into the 2024-2025 Integrated Annual Report for Mary Energies Limited. And we're going to try to solve one of the most, well, brutal corporate paradoxes in the energy sector.
It really is a fascinating puzzle.
You've got this stack of sources in front of you, and on the surface, the math just kind of feels broken. So we're going to decode how this invisible giant operates, who buys their output, and dissect the exact mechanisms that cause their profits to just vanish, despite record-breaking performance.
Yeah, it is the ultimate case study in macroeconomic gravity, to be honest. I mean, looking at Mary Energies isn't just an exercise in reading a balance sheet. You are looking at the foundational architecture of a national economy.
Oh, absolutely.
Their 2025 performance illustrates a harsh reality, which is that you can execute your operational strategy flawlessly, but if the regulatory and global environment shifts underneath you, sheer volume will not save your margins.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the mystery of their disappearing profit, we first have to understand the sheer scale of the engine they run.
Right, the actual physical operation.
Exactly. When people hear energy company, they usually picture gas stations or, I don't know, the electric utility billing them every month.
The consumer-facing side, yeah.
Right. But Mary Energies operates way upstream. They manage the country's largest gas reservoir at the Mary Field in Daharki, Sindh. They produce natural gas, crude oil, and condensate.
Which is a huge factor for them.
And just to be clear on that last one, because it pops up constantly in your stack of sources, condensate is essentially this low-density, highly valuable liquid hydrocarbon. It sits somewhere between gas and oil, and it's basically critical for petrochemicals.
Yep, highly sought after.
So between all of these products, they pump out roughly 110,000 barrels of oil equivalent every single day.
Which is massive, capturing a 31% market share of the country's gas production. But the critical variable in their business model is their customer profile.
Right, because you and I aren't buying from them directly.
Exactly. They are strictly B2B. Their primary buyers are power generation plants, refineries, and major state-regulated gas distribution companies like SNGPL, that's SUI Northern Gas Pipelines Limited.
Which is an important distinction.
Yeah, SNGPL isn't just a corporate client. It's a heavily regulated entity bound by state energy policies. And, well, that becomes a massive trap for Mari later on.
I look at their position, and they operate less like a traditional vendor and more like the base load server in a massive national IT network.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, if this specific server crashes, the dependent applications don't just glitch, right? The whole system goes offline. Because the single most shocking statistic in the sources is this: over 90% of the gas used for urea fertilizer production in Pakistan comes exclusively from Mari Energies.
Which directly links them to the country's food security. I mean, gas synthesizes into urea fertilizer. Fertilizer determines crop yields. Crop yields feed the nation.
It's a direct chain.
Exactly. If you connect those dots, a disruption at the Mari Field triggers a systemic agricultural crisis.
And nature gave them a massive structural advantage here, too.
Yeah.
The chemical composition of the raw gas they extract from the Mari Field required zero additional processing to be used for urea.
It's incredibly rare.
They literally pull it out of the ground, and it is practically tailor-made for their biggest clients.
And that creates an incredibly deep competitive moat. I mean, they run a low-cost, gas-centric upstream exploration and production, or E&P business.
Right.
They finance themselves primarily through equity, so they avoid heavy debt burdens. And they lock in these captive B2B customers with long-term allocation contracts.
So it's super stable.
Under normal economic conditions, yes. It's basically a blueprint for printing money.
Which makes the 2025 financial results look mathematically impossible.
Yeah, it really does.
Let's look at the numbers. In the 2025 fiscal year, Mary Energies hit their highest ever hydrocarbon sales: 39.13 million barrels of oil equivalent.
A historic peak.
Yeah, that's up from 39.0 million in 2024. Yet, net sales actually dropped from 181.83 billion rupees in 2024 to 177.10 billion in 2025.
The revenue just shrank.
And the bottom line took an absolute beating. Net profit fell from 77.29 billion rupees down to 65.14 billion. Earnings per share collapsed from 64.37 down to 54.25.
A huge hit.
So wait, if I am practically printing my own money with zero processing costs, how is it mathematically possible that I sell more volume than ever before but lose 12 billion rupees year over year? Like, where does that cash literally go?
What's fascinating here is how quickly external regulatory forces can just devour operational gains. I mean, two exogenous drivers essentially stole that 12 billion rupees.
Okay.
And neither had anything to do with how well Mari pumped gas. First is the price and currency linkage. In this specific regulatory environment, domestic gas prices are legally pegged to international crude oil prices.
Wait, pause there. Why would a sovereign nation peg the price of its own local dirt, like gas extracted domestically, to the totally volatile global crude oil market?
Well, it comes down to import parity pricing and sovereign guarantees. Governments often set long-term wellhead gas prices based on a basket of international crude prices.
Okay, but why?
To ensure E&P companies get a globally competitive return on their massive capital investments, if they didn't peg it to a global standard, foreign and domestic investors wouldn't risk the billions required to explore for gas in the first place.
Ah, so it's an incentive to get them to dig?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's a double-edged sword. In the 2024 to 2025 period, the international crude benchmarks they were tied to were highly unfavorable.
Right, prices were down.
Yeah, and you compound that with severe currency exchange devaluations in Pakistan. So the actual realized value of every unit Mari sold shrank, even as their physical volume grew.
Okay, so they're outrunning a falling price ceiling dictated by global markets. But looking at the sources, there was a second, more immediate hit to the balance sheet.
The wellhead levy. In November 2024, the government imposed an additional 15% wellhead levy specifically on the Mari field.
And we really need to clarify the mechanics of a wellhead levy here, because it is far more destructive to cash flow than, say, a standard corporate tax.
Oh, absolutely.
Because corporate tax takes a slice of your profit after you've deducted your operating expenses. But a wellhead levy taxes the raw resource at the literal point of extraction, regardless of how much it cost you to get it out of the ground.
That is the crucial distinction. A wellhead levy is an unavoidable top-line amputation. The government essentially declares that 15% of the value of the gas belongs to them the second it hits the surface.
Ouch.
Yeah, it immediately erodes your margin before you've even paid your staff or, serviced your equipment. So Mari Energies is pumping furiously, breaking historical production records just to tread water against a devalued currency in this massive new extraction tax.
Man. But if they're taking hits at the wellhead and on the global market, how do they defend that remaining 65 billion rupee profit? Like, they clearly didn't just sit there and absorb the blows.
No, they didn't. They executed an aggressive defensive strategy. Operationally, they brought new fields online, Spinwam, Soho, and Pitiji, and they did it really efficiently using advanced techniques like horizontal drilling.
I actually saw horizontal drilling highlighted multiple times in your sources.
It's a game changer for them.
Yeah, because rather than just drilling a vertical hole straight down like a straw, they drill down to the reservoir depth and then literally steer the drill bit 90 degrees to bore horizontally through the gas-bearing rock.
Exactly.
And it exposes massively more surface area of the reservoir to the wellbore, which radically increases the volume you can extract from a single surface location.
Right. It maximizes yield while minimizing surface infrastructure costs, which ties directly into their extreme cost management strategy. But even with brilliant engineering, they ran straight into a macroeconomic brick wall with their customer base.
SNGPL.
Yeah, we mentioned SNGPL earlier, the state-regulated distributor. Despite having long-term contracts, Mari faced what the sources call forced gas curtailments.
Meaning they weren't allowed to sell.
Basically, SNGPL had to throttle back on buying Mari's locally produced gas.
This is the part that kind of defies logic for me. You have a domestic supplier producing cheap gas, but the distributor refuses to take it.
Because SNGPL is bound by state-level take-or-pay contracts for imported liquid natural gas, LNG.
Oh, I see.
The country committed to buying expensive imported LNG from foreign suppliers with very rigid penalties if they don't take delivery. So SNGPL is forced to prioritize injecting the expensive foreign LNG into the national grid.
Leaving Mari's cheap domestic gas stranded at the wellhead.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? It's essentially a liquidity freeze. The physical product is ready to move, but the structural gears of the market are jammed. And that brings us to, honestly, the most toxic phrase in the entire annual report, circular debt.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, circular debt is the slow-moving poison of the energy sector over there. It occurs when state subsidies, distribution losses, and unpaid bills create this chain reaction of insolvency.
Like a massive traffic jam.
That's a great way to put it. The government owes the power plants subsidies. The power plants, lacking those funds, can't pay SNGPL for the gas they burned.
Right.
SNGPL, completely starved of cash, can't pay Mori Energies for the gas they supplied.
So Mari's 65 billion rupee profit is largely just sitting on a ledger somewhere.
Pretty much.
On paper, they are highly profitable. In reality, they are trapped in a standoff where every entity in the supply chain owes the other entity billions, and literally nobody has actual cash to clear the books.
Which is exactly why Mari relied so heavily on their fertilizer clients to survive 2025.
Hmm.
Unlike power plants, which, fluctuate based on seasonal electricity demand and are deeply entangled in the circular debt trap, fertilizer production requires steady, year-round baseload gas.
They just constantly need it.
Right. The fertilizer companies have better cash flow, and they actually pay their bills. They provided the steady liquidity Mari needed to keep the lights on while the rest of the grid was frozen.
This raises such an important question for the board of directors. You execute your core E&P business flawlessly. You drill advanced horizontal wells, you hit all-time production records. You manage your costs ruthlessly. And despite doing everything right, you lose 12 billion rupees because of international crude prices, a stroke of the pen extraction tax, and a domestic supply chain that physically cannot pay you.
It's maddening.
If that is your reality, your legacy business model is fundamentally unsafe.
And that realization is the catalyst for the most radical portion of their 2025 annual report. They accepted that outworking a flawed macroeconomic environment was no longer a viable long-term strategy.
Here's where it gets really interesting. In January 2025, they execute a total corporate rebrand. They drop Mori Petroleum Company Limited, a name that obviously heavily anchored them to fossil fuels.
Right.
And they become Mari Energies Limited. But looking at the sources, this is not just some PR firm updating the letterhead. They launched two entirely new, wholly owned subsidiaries that seem, well, totally alien to a gas company.
They initiated what they call Vision 2030. The first subsidiary is Mera Minerals. They acquired mining exploration licenses in the Chagai district of Balochistan.
Now, the leap from extracting natural gas to extracting copper and gold makes a certain kind of geological sense, I guess. You are still moving earth and managing massive industrial sites.
Well, the logic there is hedging against the energy transition. The global economy is slowly pivoting away from fossil fuels,
Sir.
which obviously puts a long-term expiration date on Mari's core product. But the infrastructure required for renewable energy, solar panels, wind turbines, electric vehicles, it requires an exponential increase in critical minerals like copper.
Ah, so they're supplying the next era of energy.
By moving into Chagai, Mari is securing a foothold in the exact commodities that will replace their current revenue stream.
But the second subsidiary is where I really have to push back, because it sounds like a boardroom fever dream. Mari Technologies and its subsidiary Sky 47.
Yeah, the tech pivot.
They are building 5-megawatt state-of-the-art AI and cloud data centers in Islamabad and Karachi. How does a company whose core competency is drilling holes in the Sindh Desert pivot to building server farms for artificial intelligence?
I know, it seems like a massive overreach until you strip a data center down to its foundational requirements. What actually is a 5-megawatt AI data center?
Just a lot of computers, right?
Well, it is essentially a massive, highly complex power consumption engine. It requires flawless project management, intense cooling infrastructure, and an absolutely uninterrupted energy supply.
Okay.
And what does an upstream E&P company do? They build massive, highly complex industrial infrastructure in remote locations, they manage intense thermal dynamics, and they guarantee uninterrupted energy delivery.
Oh, wow. I see the overlap now. They aren't writing the AI code. They are building and powering the physical architecture the code lives on.
Precisely. They are leveraging their core competency, executing massive capital projects, and managing energy flows and applying it to a sector with exponential growth potential.
That is incredibly smart.
And more importantly, data centers are entirely insulated from the wellhead levies and import parity pricing traps that crippled their 2025 gas profits. They are building a completely separate financial engine.
So, as you look at this stack of sources, what does this all mean for you as a listener? Mari Energies is really a masterclass in reading the writing on the wall.
Absolutely.
They prove that in the modern corporate landscape, operational excellence is no longer enough to guarantee survival. You can literally break your own historical records and still watch your margins evaporate due to macroeconomic gravity.
Yeah, playing the old game perfectly doesn't work if the rules change.
Right. True resilience isn't just fighting harder in your current lane. It's recognizing when the lane itself is collapsing, changing your identity, and securing territory in mining and artificial intelligence before the market forces you to.
And I want to leave you with a final thought from the 2025 report that perfectly encapsulates this whole era of corporate reinvention. Beyond mining and AI, Mary Energies is also heavily evaluating a carbon capture and storage pilot program.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's called Project Sequestra, and they're doing it alongside green hydrogen initiatives. They are actively developing the technology to capture industrial carbon emissions and inject them back into subterranean rock formations.
Which is a profound structural irony if you think about it.
It really is. I mean,
Yeah.
think about the trajectory here. For over half a century, this company's entire wealth generation model was based on extracting hydrocarbons out of the earth.
Right.
And now they are laying the groundwork for a future where their most lucrative business model might be getting paid massive premiums by global industries to permanently bury carbon back into the exact same geological vaults they spent decades emptying out.
Getting paid to pump the problem out and then getting paid to pump the solution back in. That is a brilliant evolution. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.